Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and today is November 20th, 2014, episode 90. And this time we are going to go to one of Ithaca's most favorite parks, Stewart Park, down on Cayuga Lake. So just where is that? Let's take the perspective of Cayuga Lake, the entire Cayuga Lake watershed. This map courtesy of the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network, something you might want to check out at cayugalake.org, showing all the sub-watersheds of Cayuga Lake. But Cayuga Lake is certainly more than just the water in the lake itself, but it's all the land from which the streams and so forth drain to the lake. Anyway, we're not going to talk too much about watershed today. We're going to go down to the southern end of the watershed. Zooming in here, you can see actually up at the upper right it says Fall Creek. That's the Fall Creek sub-watershed, which actually encompasses Stewart Park more or less. So now we're going to look at an aerial picture. This is by my friend Bill Hecht, who likes to get up in an airplane and take a lot of pictures of the Cayuga Valley. And right just below center you see a sort of a triangle of land facing the lake, and just lower left of center is a stream coming in. That is Fall Creek. So draining all that water to the upper right there. It's actually the largest single sub-watershed of Cayuga Lake. And everything to the right of Fall Creek up to the highway, which is Route 13, that and up to the lake, that is Stewart Park and the Forties Bird Sanctuary, which are kind of linked. Zooming in a little more closely, the Stewart Park again is the area right along the waterfront with the trees and the lawns and so forth. And then the bird sanctuary, the Forties Bird Sanctuary, or Renwick Wildwoods it's been called also, is part of that whole system there. So it's very interesting. And Fall Creek again is to the left, and Route 13 forming the other side of the triangle on the right. And the bottom of the picture is just looking at Ithaca High School and their track and football field and baseball diamond and so forth. Another view of it by Bill Hecht at a different time of year, looking from the west. Over down the lower center is the Allen H. Truman State Marine Park and its marina basin. You can see most of the boats are out because this is the fall. And then again, in the middle of the picture, Fall Creek is coming out to Cayuga Lake with the jetty that separates the mouth of Cayuga Inlet, which is in the lower right, comes in from the mouth of Fall Creek. But upper center in that triangular piece of land again above Fall Creek is Stewart Park and the Bird Sanctuary. So we're going to go down and take a look on the ground here now, get some of the images that you know better, which is along the shore with the beautiful willows along the shore. Now we have the Cayuga Waterfront Trail, which is shown right here. It's a recent addition to the park. And then at least in the past, we've been having the Ithaca Festival, the final day of the Ithaca Festival at Stewart Park. It hasn't happened this past year or so. Here's the large pavilion that's generally known as, sometimes called the Dance Pavilion, and music going on at a former Ithaca Festival. And the mayor has brought the Independence Day fireworks back to Stewart Park and the golf course area, but particularly Stewart Park. Again, I guess it was there once before, but in any case, there it is. And you go there and picnic and walk and play tennis and go to the playground, or you can view wildlife. There's a lot of geese there, which is actually causes some conflicts with human uses and what have you. But that shoreline is what is really so special along the south end of Cayuga Lake, and the beautiful views and the beautiful sunsets that we can get there. We've all gone and looked at those, and it's been made famous by the Ithaca Sunset song by Mark Rust. That you probably have heard if you've been around Ithaca any time, but you can get some beautiful sunsets along Cayuga Lake at Stewart Park. So what are we going to talk about Stewart Park today? Well, actually a couple of days ago on the 18th, there was the Friends of Stewart Park, which is a very impressive organization that has formed to revitalize the park well, it had some former glory, and they're going to bring new glory to it. And they had a meeting. Here's from their webpage: Stewart Park Revitalization Plan Public Meeting Tuesday, November 18th at Cinemapolis. So I went by there and I took some video of their presentation, and that was kind of fun. Here's a description of it. Join the Friends of Stewart Park. And this is on their Facebook page, by the way, which you can go to. And join the Friends of Stewart Park, the City of Ithaca, the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce, the Wharton Studio Museum, and other park revitalization partners for a 1-hour presentation on the many park revitalization projects that have been completed, are underway, or are being considered in Stewart Park. So I'm going to show much of that presentation. Probably have to do over a couple of programs. If you want to find out more about the Friends of Stewart Park, look, I have their website listed there right under where it says Friends of Stewart Park, friendsofstewartpark.org. So you might want to check that out. So okay, so I'm going to take you actually to a video. This starts off in Cinemapolis in the dark, but they're showing a slideshow which will be very interesting. The different partners are showing different aspects of what has been done. And we're going to start off with an introduction by Rick Manning, who's the executive director of the Friends of Stewart Park. So I'm going to cue that up with this cover image here, and we'll be right with you.
So this is what we'll be talking about tonight. Just want to tell you the mission of the Friends of Stewart Park is to enhance and revitalize Stewart Park in partnership with the City of Ithaca for the enjoyment of Ithaca residents and visitors to our community. Just a brief. So the Stewart Park complex includes the golf course, the Renwick Wildwood, which most of you probably know is a Fawerges Bird Sanctuary in Stewart Park.
Rick, can you project that this way, please?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And Lighthouse Woods is owned by Cornell University. In Stewart Park proper, just some terminology, the Renwick Wildwood. We'll be talking about the picnic pavilion tonight, which is commonly known as the large pavilion. We're kind of bringing back some historic terminology. The tea pavilion as opposed to the small pavilion. The Fawerges Bird Sanctuary as opposed to maybe the Swan Pond. And we have many partners. 2 of them you've met. I also want to thank a couple of others. The Park Foundation has generously supported Friends of Stewart Park in getting off the ground. And I know John's here. And thank you to everyone at the Park Foundation. Tompkins County Tourism Program has been very generous, and we'll tell you a little bit about that. The Creating Healthy Places Project, which is a project of the Human Services Coalition. Vicki Armstrong's here, the current coordinator. The others you'll meet during the course of the presentation.
Okay, so that was the introduction. We're now going to do, Rick is going to give us a brief history of the park during this presentation. So we'll go right back to our cover image here.
So now a brief but heavily illustrated history of the park. I love these pictures. So it's never been a place for settlement. It's really been a place for fishing and camping back in the Cayuga era. And then in the 1830s, this is a Walton photo, and you can see it was the steamboat era where steamboats are plying Cayuga Lake, bringing barges into Ithaca. We're part of the canal system, as you probably know. Rowing is a huge part of our history and has a strong relationship to Stewart Park. Back in the day, it was a big deal. It was sort of the football of the 1890s. They were studs, and they were full of themselves back in time, I think. And people loved to watch it. They would gather at Fulton Street on rail cars and move up the east side of the lake on the railroad lines and fill up these cars. It's really quite a phenomenon. And look at the shot looking north, going up Route 34B. This is a new shot to me, actually. So the rail cars below, the cars above. So at the time, the Cascadilla School in its role as a preparatory school for Cornell, wanted to create a rowing program, and they built this incredible building, the Cascadilla Boathouse in the park, which is a shingle-style building on the National Register of Historic Places. It's kind of a shell of what it used to be, pardon the pun, but it was, it has had a long history, and it's really great now to have the boat club back in that building and occupying it for its intended use. In the 1890s, like many communities, this Ithaca Street Railway or trolley systems developed destination parks to try to drive ridership on off hours, on weekends and evenings. And our Ithaca Street Railway developed Renwick Park as a destination park. And you know the complex of buildings. There was a water tower, as most of you know. The pavilions have moved. The small pavilion or the T pavilion has moved around a bit. But it was a fabulous destination, beautifully landscaped, beautifully cared for, beautifully designed by Vivian and Gibb architects. And you can see the trolley line running behind the pavilions, the water tower. Excuse me? And the band shell, there was a lot of music in the park. The Ithaca Concert Band, led by Patty Conway, had huge performances there on a nightly basis during the summer. Many thousands of people would come. You can see the pier, the steamboat pier in the distance. Big steamers would come down from resorts, Sheldrake, Glenwood Point, and have a lot of fun in Stewart Park in the evenings particularly. So it was a great gathering place and hugely popular. That era was short-lived by the early teens. At the beginning of the automobile era, the trolley system sort of fell apart, and the park fell into disuse at that point. I just wanted to briefly mention that this whole area, the Renwick Marsh at the time, was studied by Arthur Allen, who founded the Lab of Ornithology. You can see some of the mapping from his research. He studied the ecology of the red-winged blackbird and its habitat in the Catdale Marsh of the area. And the Cuba Bird Club was instrumental in saving the Renwick Wildwood. In 1913, the city wanted to clear it and tidy it up. And the people stood up, and I love this quote by James Needham. I won't read it, but it's sort of a wonderful vision about the importance of birding in this area. So they rose up, they went to public meetings, they generated a lot of support, and they convinced the Board of Public Works not to convert this and to leave it as the Renwick Wildwood. They developed this gateway, which is still there behind the railroad tracks on the entrance from the high school. Some of you have probably seen it if you walk through there. The two caps are missing. You can see they're kind of lying. And we'd love to restore this someday, but you won't hear about that today.
Okay, so that's a really quick, brief history of Renwick Park, which is now Stewart Park, up until about 100 years ago, almost exactly 100 years ago, when the Wharton motion picture, silent film studio got established there. So we have a presentation by a representative of the Wharton Studio Museum, and they actually have a small bookmark here showing, I'm not sure who that person is, but anyway, the Silent Movie Month, let's see, Wharton Studio Museum, a 501c3 nonprofit, plans to build a museum in the historic Wharton Movie Studio building in Stewart Park, and that's not where the large pavilion is, but rather the other building where the bathrooms are, and they store park maintenance equipment and so forth. So that's going to be developed in a museum. I won't have time today to show you a detailed presentation of what they plan. That will be later in a future show, but I will put on this video of a representative of the Wharton Studio Museum Planning Group that is working on that museum project. So.
And then the Wharton studio, the Wharton brothers came to town, and Diana Reeson was going to mention a little bit about the history of that.
Hi, everyone. Rick has warned me that if I'm not brief, a giant cane will be a hook will be used to pull me off the floor, which is very apropos because that's what they did in the vaudeville days. And the Wharton Pavilion at one point was a vaudeville theater. So I just wanted to sort of riff on what Jen said about personal experiences in the park. I moved here in 2001, and Stewart Park was one of the first places that I went to because I was pregnant with my younger child, but I had a 2.5-year-old son, and we went there many, many times a week. And so I just feel so happy that I can be part of an effort to revitalize the park. 100 years ago, the Wharton Studio was a vibrant movie studio in what was then, as Rick said, Renwick Park. Theodore Wharton had come to Ithaca in 1912, sent by the S&A Film Company to shoot some typical scenes of dorm life at Cornell, and to also shoot a Cornell-Penn State football game. And I believe the Cornell fields at that time were sort of where the high school and Boynton are now. And Ted Wharton was so enamored with the natural beauty that abounded in the area, and the gorges and the lake and the stands of trees, that he came back a year later, and with his brother Leopold, they leased 65 acres of Renwick Park and created a silent movie theater, a silent movie studio. Many of the best-known actors of the day, Lionel Barrymore, Bo White, Irene Castle, even Oliver Hardy, came to Ithaca to shoot films and make episodic serials that the Whartons created. And here are some shots. They used the lake, they used the gorges. They really, really embraced Ithaca, and the denizens of Ithaca embraced them back. People were invited by the Whartons to come to the park to watch movies being made, and the newspaper at that time was just full, sort of on a daily basis, of stories of the comings and goings of the stars and their entourages. So this is a beautiful shot of some miniatures that the Whartons built, that their set designers built, that they later used explosives to blow up. And this was for simulating some shots in a couple of their films, which were sort of World War I propaganda films. So this is just one of the most beautiful photographs. There was an influenza epidemic in 1918, keeping people out of the movie theaters in Ithaca. People stayed at home. The Whartons suffered some financial woes, and perhaps some of the pull of the West Coast and burgeoning Hollywood caused them to leave Ithaca. A company called Grossman Pictures took over the studio for a year, the studio building. Then they left, and a state-funded company called Cayuga Pictures came in and made just, I think, 1 or 2 films. But really, by 1921, filmmaking had really stopped in Ithaca. And the Whartons were really innovators, pioneers, and entrepreneurs in a time when filmmaking was an emerging art form and an emerging industry. And the fact that we have this incredible artifact from that era, this building, one of a handful of such studios still standing in the country, is truly special. It's in our own backyard. So that's a little bit, sort of a capsule of the history of the Whartons.
Thank you, Diana.
Okay, so that's again a very brief history of the Wharton studio. It was there 100 years ago, and so now we're going to go back to Rick Manning, the executive director of the Friends of Stewart Park. Here's their brochure. Who is going to talk about Stewart Park after it was called Renwick Park after the Wharton Studios closed and became Stewart Park, and kind of bring us up to the present and look to the future. We won't have time to see that entire part of the presentation. They were there almost an hour and a half. So I will, in general, for the whole thing that they did. So I will be continuing this presentation, but I'll show you the beginning of the this sort of 20th century history, or the history of since the beginning of Stewart Park in 1921, coming up to the present and looking to the future, and I'll begin that now.
So when the Whartons left, Mayor Edwin Stewart, felt that this should become a public park, which was common in that era. And he donated $150,000 of his own money towards this effort. And there's a later photo of this, but in 1927 the citizens raised money. He died also before it opened. It opened on July 4th, 1921. He had died about 3 weeks before that. They put this memorial flagpole garden and erected it. It was designed by Vivian and Gibb as well, and it was constructed in 1927 in his honor. And the only record we have of it is, whoops, I'm sorry, is right here. That's sort of what we have modeled the restoration after. So it's a pretty interesting shot of, just if you're interested in dredging, you can see there's dredging operations going on. The waterfront needs it. There's a lot of dikes, and a lot of the trees are circled with dikes to protect them. The Fuertes Bird Sanctuary was another Cayuga Bird Club initiative. And this was in honor of Luis Agassiz Fuertes. And it was basically a constructed, manipulated marsh area with open water to attract waterfowl for bird watching. And this was done in 1927, 1928, and then following that in the early about 1934, they added this overlook so that people could stand and watch. That's still standing, most of you know it, in what we commonly know as a swan pond. Another project we'll not really talk about tonight, but this is what it looks like today, and it's in need of restoration. A couple of 1932 photographs. This is when the park was maybe at its peak of in its public park area. A lot of new construction, new roadways were being built, pathways around the flagpole garden. The buildings were still in great condition. There was a master plan prepared in 1934 where it was sort of taken to another level. You can see the roadway connections to the golf course. A lot of the golf course design was based on this 1934 master plan. But the bones of the park are here. There was a sort of a Beaux-Arts pier with a swimming pool in the middle of it there, which is a feature that was never constructed. But a lot of nice design elements here, that most of which are still extant in the park today. We know a little bit less about this area. There's tons of great images of the old historic parks, and we'd like to collect more images. We'll talk about that in a minute. But swimming obviously was something that people were very fond of. But as you can see from some of these pictures, it's a very, and we know it's very shallow, and people are swimming way, way out into the water. So you had lifeguard stands set out. Because of the turbidity of the water, swimming, and someone drowned in 1961. There's been no swimming since that time, and it's doubtful that can ever return. We're not going to talk about that tonight. We can certainly do a question and answer period. I can tell you about it, but we think that's such a long-term prospect that we're not really considering that as we haven't explored that in great detail at this point. Scott Heyman, who many of you know, former county administrator and director of Planned Parenthood, sent some family pictures of that era. If you have any Polaroids or films you'd like to share, we'd love to collect them. And then when I moved to town in the 1980s, I went to Cornell University. I went away in 1986, came back during the midst of this huge brouhaha around Stewart Park. There were a couple of plans done. Tom Niederkorn did a plan. There was actually a lot of really great information in it. few recommendations that really sent people off the deep end, like cutting down the willows and totally changing the circulation in the park. Trowbridge at the time was hired after that and did a design study, and there was a lot of controversy around, a lot of it backlash from the previous study that Peter had to deal with. So it was a period of a lot of controversy around the park, and what came out of it really was the formation of the Parks Commission was one recommendation, and there was sort of a preservation guidelines that were identified. So that was the point of agreement, is that we should not be too aggressive with the park, but try to preserve it and improve the maintenance of it. And the Parks Commission was established as the vehicle to do that. During that same era, or a little bit later, the city got a grant to restore the boathouse, or stabilize the boathouse to lift it 18 inches. And you can see how it was lifted, a new foundation built underneath it. And in the 90s, also, the Tompkins County Waterfront Plan was created. This is where the Cayuga Waterfront Trail, as we know it, was envisioned, and the park was kind of put on the map of sort of state funding at that time. This was done at the era when the Erie Canal was shifting from sort of a transportation administered operation to more of a recreation way. So there were opportunities for funding that the city wanted to take advantage of. So that's sort of much of the history. The recent planning, I think, really began when there was a feasibility study done for phase 3 of the waterfront trail that went through Stewart Park. And at that time, there was some issues, people saying, why are you spending all this money on the trail when the park is in such poor condition? As a trail designer, I was very aware that trails are really about the corridor and the experience that you're traveling through while on the trail. So I kind of got tuned into this whole place more than I had before, and I met Scott Wiggins at the time, who was also on the Strategic Tourism Planning Board and very interested in enhancing the park. I should introduce Scott. Where is Scott? Scott's the president of the Friends of Stewart Park. He's done a huge amount. So we were successful in getting a planning grant from the Tompkins County Tourism Program, and we did the first rehabilitation action plan. Following that, the trail was constructed in Stewart Park, and we think that's been a great thing for the park. Then we completed a building study after that, where a lot of the buildings were looked at in sort of a conceptual level, but in some detail. And now we're doing a third study where we're trying to bring that all together and updating it. One of the recommendations of the first plan was that we form a Friends of Stewart Park, and in 2011 we did that.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for today to talk about the revitalization plan and what has been happening. So we'll continue that in a future episode. Perhaps next week, we'll see. Keep checking. If you want to keep track of all of this online, you can go to our website, walkinpark.com, and we'll have all the episodes and all the past episodes. There's my little marker. I'm going to be ending this show shortly. And of course, if you go to the website of the Friends of Stewart Park, friendsofstewartpark.org, you can learn a lot more about it. They're looking for donations and what have you. But once again, this is episode 90, November 20th, Walk in the Park. So we'll see you again soon.